retired biology teacher and lifelong adventurer, TJ McKenzie brings a wealth of real-world experience to the page. His first self-published memoir, Phoenix: The Rise of a Warrior, was a deeply personal reflection of his life and a way to make sense of the world and share what he has learned. Now, with the gripping Hellfire Saints trilogy, he weaves tales of resilience, transformation, and the human spirit. A resident of Southwest Mississippi, TJ McKenzie has spent 40 years practicing and teaching martial arts, exploring the open road by motorcycle, and traveling in search of inspiration and insight. An observer of life and seeker of knowledge, he now balances writing with caring for his aging father. Each story TJ McKenzie crafts reflects life, driven by curiosity, grounded in discipline, lit with a spark of adventure, and laced with romance. Join this episode of Caffeinated Creatives, a two-part episode with TJ, as we discuss his creative process and talk about his book and inspirations. Welcome today's guest, TJ McKenzie.
Well, we are here in the deep south of Mississippi. What was that city name?
Tilton.
Tilton, yeah, Tilton, and I am here with the one and only TJ.
That's
right?
me.
TJ, he is an author, an educator, a martial arts practitioner, a writer, of course, and I'm excited to hear your story, hear what you learned from being a martial art practitioner, what your new book, hint, hint, is gonna be about. Right. And just hear stories from you. So show me around this wonderful spot. What are we seeing?
Well, this goes back 3 generations. This was my grandfather's. My dad also has land out direction, and it's been passed on to me, but I'm not much of a farmer. So I've rented out to a very great guy.
Did you grow up here?
Yes. I've been here since probably I would say 6.
Wow.
I was born in Mobile, Alabama. We lived in Jackson for a while, Pearl, before it was ever a town. And then we've always had property here, though. This is where my grandparents are from.
Wow.
I'm actually living in my grandparents' house.
What does this area mean to you, mean to your family?
Well, it's always been special, but I do not hunt, do not fish. I do not do the normal things that people in the South like to do sometimes. So we have a lot of hunting land, but I don't hunt, but I have people that do hunt. But as far as it meaning, it's the heart of my family in a lot of ways.
Your dog. Nice. I've never hunted before. I've got an uncle who I keep bugging that he tells me he wants to teach me how to shoot a gun and some of these type of things. He's got a nice property. And 2 hours from Clarksville that is beautiful, has a nice long creek, and he's building homes in there. It's just, I love what he's hoping to do there. So land is awesome to have. I bet this is very peaceful. What's your favorite part about this land?
Solitude to some degree, because I'm far enough away from people that, you know, I can have people here. But then again, I don't have to be. We live like 12 miles from Monticello, and that's the closest town we have.
Monticello.
Yes.
Yesterday I spent half a day there. I was telling Casey that I probably never spent that much time in Monticello than yesterday. It was fun. It's cool.
Casey is an awesome person.
Oh, yes, of course. Oh,
But of
buddy.
course, you know that.
Oh, yes, of course.
I taught her in school. Her father was my boss.
Oh, yeah?
Get down now.
That's
Go.
okay. We got some funny pups over here. Educator, you said.
31 years.
What got you into education? What inspired you?
My mother. My mother was a librarian. We rode to school every day in a 68 Mustang that was mine. We listened to music together, and it just kind of seemed the right thing to do. And I love teaching.
What did you teach?
Well, a lot of things. Human anatomy, biology, advanced biology, physics, aviation science,
Aviation science.
Yes.
What?
and aerospace.
Wow. How did you get into aviation science and airspace?
I volunteered to teach it pretty much.
Huh.
And you give me a book, I can figure it out.
Wow. Now, I also know that you are an author, and it's about your life in one way or another?
Not really.
Not really? Is it inspired by your life?
The characters
The
are.
characters are, okay.
The characters are pretty much.
How's being a teacher helped you being a writer?
Well, I started off, I love to write anyway, but the things that I wrote at that time were nonfiction, of course.
Uh-huh.
I like to prepare manuals for the kids to make them understand or to allow them understand biological concepts in a more down-to-earth means instead of out of the textbook. So I used it and I would write these little manuals, give it to them, and they seemed to like it. I had my own website for my class, and I would have a lot of that.
Who did you look up to as a young man, as a teacher, young teacher? Who were your inspirations?
Well, I have to be honest.
Well, I want nothing more but honesty.
I never have been a worshiper or had people that I looked up to. The only two that really was the guiding compass in my life or the guiding light in my life was my parents.
Uh-huh.
I just never did. I mean, I love sports. I love cinema. Love actors. But I never did have that need to look up to them. I don't know why. Never knew. Because I love my parents, and
Your parents were your
they were.
guidance.
They were. I have to say that.
What were your parents like?
My dad actually was a biker
Oh,
back in the 40s. He was kind of a blue collar kind of guy. Loved farming and ranching. Loved to raise cattle. My mother, on the other hand, this is where she was raised actually. She loved reading. That was her love. And she was educated. She didn't have a degree, but she was the librarian at our local school. And she was well thought of. So that was a mixture there that I got from them. And just think about this. This would have been in the 40s. My dad was from another town over in another county, and he showed up here to pick up my mom on his Harley.
oh wow.
And my grandfather was old school. He didn't like that too much.
The Harley part.
Yeah, I mean, my dad kind of, my dad wore the leather jackets. I have photos of him on his
Oh
bike.
wow.
And I just kind of always wanted a bike because of that.
Interesting.
They were definitely the guiding light in my life.
When did you get your first bike?
7 years old.
7 years old. You were
Never-
7 and you got your first bike.
Never had ridden one by myself. I had ridden on the back of a couple of friends of mine that were my cousins. One was a moped and one was like a small Honda. But I got it on Christmas morning when I was 7 years old. Had never been on one. We got it out of the house. Dad cranked it. And I left, rode right up here, turned around. And when I was coming out of this little driveway road here, I popped a wheelie.
You popped the wheelie?
Had no idea how to do it. It just did it. It was definitely by accident.
Popped the wheelie.
Yeah,
That's
I
funny.
did. And from then on, I have always loved motorcycles.
Huh. What? How many motorcycles have you had?
About 6.
6. Wow. What was your next motorcycle then after that?
It was a Honda
Honda.
CB 175. I rode that during high school.
Which one of your motorcycles was the dearest to your heart?
A
This?
Harley.
Show me.
Because my dad owned a Harley, and I always wanted to own a Harley. This is my
Harleys are
second
nice.
Harley.
Your second Harley. What was your first Harley?
A Road King. This is a Street Glide.
Interesting.
Road Glide was more, the Street Glide, my first bike was more of a cruiser without the bags, but I had bags put on. It had a windshield, not a fairing. It was a Road
What's the
King.
difference?
Nothing, same
Oh,
type
the same
motor,
thing.
same size forks, everything's the same. It's just it's fixed up. This is a lot more comfortable on long trips, and I love long trips.
What's the longest trip you've done?
I've been to LA.
LA with this
Francisco.
guy.
Well, I've been on this one and the original, and the first Harley. I went, or I made it to LA, turned up, went to San Francisco, come across Yellowstone. Wow. About 6,800 miles.
Ooh, you have a lot
2
of
weeks.
memories then that you created with your Harley.
But the first cross-country trip I made was in 1983. I was a lot younger, and I went on a 750 Yamaha Virago.
Woo.
No GPS, of course, then. No cell phones. You had to know how to read a map. But thankfully, my dad drove trucks, too. He was a trucker, owned trucks. And I learned at a young age how to read a map.
But a lot of people don't know how to read
No,
a map
not at all.
nowadays. It's the convenience of having it on your phone.
It is.
I remember needing to read a map. When I was younger, we would go to Croatia for family trips. Everybody was looking for it. It was my dad, my mom, my cousin, my mom's sister. My cousin is her son, and then so that family, and then we would kind of go together on these mini vacations. It was awesome. I loved it. There's no iPhones. There was no like laptops. It's just being there in the moment with your family, and I think all this technology kind of makes it different, because then you
It
can
does.
just, look at your phone or iPad or whatever and not be present with your family.
That's right. That's
Which I
exactly
think in
correct.
ways you might have to come up with some rules, when we do this, no laptop or no this. But I miss those. Those were some phenomenal trips, There were so many ice cream stations. Every day we would pick a different ice cream place next to the sea, Adriatic Sea, and just lick a ginormous amount of ice cream that was cheap at the time. Like $1 or $2, you can get like 4 or 5 big old scoops of ice cream.
I know what you mean about the traveling with the parents, because I did at an early age Like my father was a trucker, like I said, and he did cross country out to L.A. And my mother, this was back when gas was probably 25 cents a gallon.
Ooh.
My mother would load up the car, carry me, and we would follow him to wherever he wanted to go, and we'd stop when he stopped. But I got to see a lot of the country that way at a young age.
I think that's super important to see other things aside where you are that shapes you as a person, that shapes the way you're thinking. You see so many things, you know. People always ask me, oh, how has it shaped you that you were born in the States, lived there until I was 7, and then lived in Hungary from 7 to 17 and then moved back. People ask me the weird question like, oh, what did you like better, US or Europe? I'm like, no idea how to even answer that question.
Right.
It's different. I'm appreciative because, you know, you get to see complete different ways of living, being, speaking, communicating, and you appreciate these differences, you know, and you see that people communicate differently, you know, things like that. That's pretty interesting.
But people are the same.
People are the
wherever.
same, yeah.
That's one thing that I love about traveling on a bike. People are automatically intrigued that I have a Mississippi tag on.
Really?
And I'm in Arizona, California, Montana, Wyoming.
Interesting. What's the first question they ask?
What are you doing here?
What do you tell them?
You rode all the way from Mississippi? Yeah. I tell them I just like to ride and discover new things.
Oh, yeah.
And every person that you stop with, if you'll give them time, they've got a different story. And I get a lot of my inspiration from that, because you walk into a place, maybe a gas station, you see someone that's interesting, you size him up or size her up, and then if they're approachable, just kind of talk to them.
Yeah.
And I have found myself sitting at a gas station for 30 minutes talking with somebody.
I love that. I love, Casey always looks at me like, oh, you're such a like social butterfly, because I can go anywhere. Given I have to feel like socially like amped up, you know, if I'm tired or something, I'm more tend to have a relaxed alone time. But, you know, I love to talk to people on the bus, on the train, wherever I am, you know, you strike up a conversation and that can inspire you. Like, I think when I'm too focused in work, you know, and I'm not out and I'm not doing engagement with people, that tends to give me lack of ideas of how to create, you know. And then it's like I feel like if I'm not working, then I'm not working.
Right.
And but that's the thing, it goes kind of against it. You have to kind of live your life to also be inspired from it, by it, and to create something that's worthwhile to show people. If you don't, only thing you're doing is sitting in a cubicle room trying to work. You know what I mean?
I don't think I could have ever worked in a cubicle.
Oh.
You know, I see these people, they're just, but what's strange about that is I feel like, and I've taken those tests, I'm an introvert to some degree.
Interesting.
I keep to myself most of the time, but if I see that they're approachable or if I know you, I have no problem, you know.
That's what I used to say when people ask me, are you introvert, extrovert? I would say I'm an introverted extrovert.
I have actually said that before.
I know, I think we talked about that.
Yes.
Like back in December when we were going to Sonic having an ice cream, remember? We had a good conversation. And one thing that struck out to me is you're such an open book person. You're thoughtful, and you do like, you're very aware of what's going on with people, how they talk, how they...
I hope so.
You know, And when I said cubicle back, it was more of a metaphor. Thankfully, I don't
understand.
work
And
in a cubicle. But what I meant is if like when I'm always in the studio and always working, that I think goes against the creativity itself.
I understood that.
I think in order to, like when I feel a little burnout or something, it's let's go to nature, let's go out, let's do something that kind of takes your mind out. I used to go on long walks, mountain biking, and honestly, that would spike ideas so much more than trying to have ideas, you know.
Well, when you're riding a motorcycle, you have a lot of time on your hands. And you can't explain the feeling you have about it, because unless you've, if you've ridden, you understand. But it's almost a spiritual thing. But that motor's running, and it's almost like a mantra. You get in tune with it, and you're on, let's say, a long desert road. And you start thinking, you start having introspective thoughts, and it just, one thing leads to another, and all of a sudden you won't even realize you've covered 100 miles, and you go,
wow. I get what you mean, because sometimes, or a lot of times when I'm driving alone, I prefer kind of solitude, and I kind of think about things or reminisce or that's where I found solutions for things I couldn't find solution for.
Exactly.
It's meditative. It's kind of interesting. I used to listen to a lot of music.
I did too.
And listen to podcasts, but a lot of times when I go to, let's say, shoot a wedding or something, I prefer that as like a solitude of time. Interesting. You're a martial arts practitioner. How did you get into martial arts, and what specific martial art?
Well, I began my junior year in college. And I've always been different. I've always thought that I was kind of an outsider here because I was adopted. I thought people may look at me a little different. And I was always a big guy, but I was soft. I did not want to fight, did not want to cause any issues. And thus, when you do that, people take advantage of that. They take kindness, as weakness. So I walked into the building, the recreation and education building there at University of Southern Mississippi. And that's where I met my instructor, who is this guy that you just met earlier. He was my original.
The guy who was here
Yes.
earlier. No kidding, he was your instructor.
Right, and he set my life on a different trajectory than it probably would have been. He built my self-confidence. And back then, karate was rough. It was Shotokan karate, Japanese style. And it was rough. He taught it in a way that was not just an art, but it was a science. So he really did not want me for a while because he had enough students. He didn't want anybody else. But I just kept going back. And finally, an opening came. A guy went outside sick and decided to quit. And he said, well, I actually have an opening. So let the beating begin, because he beat me, not in a bad way, but he forced me to be able to handle whatever came at me. Physically, mentally, whatever.
Intellectually.
Yes. And he is the smartest person I know.
Oh, wow. Martial art is such a mental game. You can learn so many aspects that you can use in different parts of your life. I did some martial art. I did Aikido, but I always wanted to get into jiu-jitsu and things like that. And
he does jiu-jitsu now.
Wow. Have you tried other martial arts apart from karate?
I have a black belt in Kali, which is a Filipino style stick fighting and knife fighting. I've trained in grappling, not necessarily jiu-jitsu.
Uh-huh.
I've trained in Ishinryu karate. I have a brown belt in it, and so I have run the gamut.
Wow. Very interesting.
I've always been one that kind of a seeker, I suppose.
Seeker?
Yeah, I'm never happy with the status quo. I mean, I'm
I
happy,
get that.
but I want to see something else. I want to do something else.
You like to understand, too.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I hate not understanding something. And I'm getting to like this research. I get it completely.
But writing is the hardest, the most difficult thing that I've ever done.
Interesting. What aspect? How
All
so?
of it. All of it. The creative process, how you put those words on the paper. It's just, when you don't do anything, then it's difficult for you to do it. And I was used to being able to, everything was, I had no problem doing things.
Mm-hmm.
But this was a deep, deep issue. But I stayed with it. Luckily, I had someone that was understanding of me and helped me through it, my editor, and so it's been a long journey, but it's been a fun journey, and I've enjoyed it. Writing to me is cathartic. It's therapeutic. There's a saying, have you ever seen, and you think about it, and motorcycle riding is as well. It says you'll never see a motorcycle parked in front of a therapist office. Well, that ain't true, but I understand the gist of it, But especially during COVID, I was writing, and it helped me.
Writing or writing?
Writing.
Writing.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Writing. That I had never thought about that. Writing and writing.
Right to write.
Yeah. And it was cathartic. I mean, it helped me tremendously. It was definitely a form of therapy for me.
Guitar was...
Because I work, I'm sole caretaker of my dad, who's 95.
Where is he?
He lives in that house right over there.
That white house over there? How long have you been taking care of him?
Since before COVID. I mean, we've been together. My mother died 13, 14 years ago. So he's been on his own. He does well to be 95. Definitely. He walks.
95, wow.
He walks every morning. He still drives.
Drives, wow.
But just down to the church.
Uh-huh. What are things that you do to yourself that grounds you? Yeah, I know you talked about how writing is a meditative act.
I'll tell you something else, that I love to push my limits. I love to walk. As an older man, I used to run, but as an older man, it's come down to where you walk. And I love to see the speed, the distance. I try to increase it all of the time. And that helps me. That's a form of therapy too. It helps. And I know that sounds simple, but it is. I also do Iaido.
What is that?
Iaido is the samurai art. It is with a katana. Now, it acts more like Tai Chi. It's meditative. It's not about who's bad, who's the meanest, who's whatever, but it's a solo performance. And I have fell in love with that. So every morning I try to get up 5 o'clock, and I try to do at least 30 minutes of that. And that kind of gets me in the mood for the rest of the day.
You gotta show me some of those moves.
Okay.
And your katana, that'd be awesome B-roll too.
It was a cold Mississippi Christmas morning with frost covering the fields and icicles hanging from the houses' eaves. It was still dark, but the horizon was beginning to brighten with varying hues of red, announcing the sun's inevitable arrival. How could I have known that this morning a lifelong love would start at the age of 7? I woke covered by 2 quilts, handmade by my grandmothers, that kept me warm during the frigid nights of Mississippi winters. I had difficulty falling asleep the night before, anticipating what Santa would leave me under the tree, and had no idea that it would become an integral part of my life for years to come.
Very interesting. Wow. I was gonna go back to creativity and the creative flow and things like that. A lot of artists that I have produced, what I've learned is the more you hold on to something, the harder it is to let go of your ideas of these things. And it's harder to have a continuous motion of, like, let's say when I'm talking about artists, I'm talking about releasing songs. Well, I think, and I had that as a musician, but then I said, F it, what I'm gonna do is just focus on the continuity aspect of it, and you get better in the process of doing it. Because there will be people who won't like it, there will be people who like it, so why overthink it? But then there's like the aspect of, what do I want? What is the message that I want to do? Or I want people to get out of this art and things like that. I don't even know if there's a question in there, but I like sharing my stuff.
Oh, it's great. I mean, I love to hear that.
Yeah.
It helps me, you know, it makes me think of things. I can be hard-headed. I don't like to let go of things. But I have no problem with change. But if I have a certain mentality, a certain thought, it's hard for me to let it go and realize that I'm wrong. But that's what intelligence is. Being able to, well, it's not intelligence necessarily, but being able to let go of your ideal and realize you may be wrong. You could very possibly be wrong.
I think stubbornness can be a good and a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many, like Walt Disney. He was told all the people in his beginning stages that he's not gonna make it and things like that. A lot of artists, a lot of people who created something new that was different from what people, quote unquote, were used to, or what was considered right way of doing something. You can look at the restaurant industry, the music industry, any sort of art industry. And in that case, if you have a vision that is completely different, if everybody tells you that it's wrong, it might be a sign that it actually might be a good idea.
Yeah.
Because then you have to be stubborn, because what if you give up because you want to be like everybody else? But then, same thing with George Lucas. Nobody liked Star Wars. But he was like, fuck it, I'm going to invest. I think he invested all his money in it. A lot of those cult classic movies, I think even Rambo and all these movies were nearly not made.
Right.
And if it wasn't because they were so driven by their own like passion, which some people could say, oh, you're hard-headed, because hard-headedness can also be, I think, taken as passionate.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying. That can be a good thing and a bad thing. And like, how is one gonna find out if, okay, I'm hard-headed, I'm wrong?
You have to follow your heart. You have to stay true to what you want. And it's kind of hard to do sometimes when you have all the critics on one side and you only have a few people that are supporters on the other, and you get to thinking, well, am I doing this, is this right?
I think it's taking calculated risks, and it's looking for, I hate to use the term signs, but like things that can give you like keep going. Like I was too hard-headed when I had a business with friends for like 7 years, because it went absolutely nowhere. I barely made money, and a lot of people said, oh, you should do it yourself, or why don't you do it yourself? You're so passionate, you're so good. And I was so in the loyalty, I don't want all the my friends, and we want to make it together, but there were so many issues that weren't addressed and kept not being addressed that didn't go anywhere. So it took me a long time to be like, okay, I'm done, and I want to do my thing the way I imagine it, the way I see it's fit. But still, I had to go through my own little journey of what am I, what do I want, what does me doing this by myself mean to me, what does it look like to run my own business based on my things, and how am I gonna treat the clients, or integrity is a big thing for me. I want to be honest, I want to give value, but my problem is I always want to give more. So if somebody wants X, I always want to give X times 4.
Right.
Which is, I got to learn to keep my ass chill and give what I want, but also showing the value that, okay, I can trust this guy goes above and beyond, but also standing up for yourself. Because if you're not well paid, well compensation, then people can learn to take advantage of you. So these are things that needs to be learned how to balance and speak out for yourself and things like that. I don't even remember where I came from with that, but
oh, I understand. Yeah. Totally.
Being an artist is it's probably one of the hardest things, and a lot of people like, oh yeah, that's just a hobby. But you have to wear so many hats, and you have to have a business mindset, but also an artistic mindset.
Did you get your love of music from your dad? I see he has guitars.
He gave it to me. It was in the family, so I found. I was everywhere. I did everything, but I was never like sit down in my bum and do one thing. But I found the guitar in the attic, and then he taught me a couple of songs, and then we found a teacher, and I got so good within a year that the teacher said he can't teach me anything else. So I studied another instrument. I studied bass guitar. pretty much the same thing happened. And then I went to school, which was a very first of a kind in Hungary, where it's a high school. You can study an art form, which can be music, dance, or visual art. And you have the regular classes. So 2 days out of 5, I had music classes, and I studied jazz guitar. And when you're in Hungary, you have to study piano too whenever you're studying music. Piano, guitar were kind of like my first instruments, and I went from there to bass guitar, drums, and anything else, because I was a big theory nerd. Big theory nerd.
So you're kind of a prodigy.
I don't know. I always looked at it, if you really want to know something, you can. I never thought of myself any different than anybody else, because I thought, well, if I put my mind to it, that's why it was so interesting, because whenever I get into something, it's like so much of a hyper fixation that I get really good at it in like months, and I'm where somebody would be in like years if you treat it. But then it's also hard because you're managing all these things that people could say as hobbies, but you're actually pretty good at it. That's what happened with me with wedding films. I got into it. Within 3 months, I've analyzed like so many people's work that I already was working, and a year later I shot like close to 50 weddings. But I do miss the music aspect, so my problem is balancing. Well, I don't want to say problem, challenge. The challenge is balancing all these different passions so that you don't forget, or you don't lose those skills, because I love playing music, and I missed it, but I got so burnt out doing it with, I don't want to say the wrong people, but
just wasn't right for you.
Yeah, it wasn't right for me, and it didn't go to where I imagined it would. That's why I think it's hard to have these things on a pedestal and say this is my absolute goal, and if I don't reach it, I'm nobody, or I'm worse, or you know what I mean. It's why it's a bit easier if you're easier in yourself, and you have these I don't want to say loose, but because you got to have goals, but you also got to be somewhat
you learn from your mistakes.
Yeah,
when you do.
That was a long monologue. I'm sorry.
No, it's no sorry. It's a show, and it's interesting.
Oh, thank you.
That's awesome. I mean, I have always wanted to play an instrument.
What instrument?
I would love to play the guitar. But now, as a child, I was given piano lessons. I can't play anything now. Just wasn't my nature. But now I love music. I'm kind of an encyclopedia of rock and roll of the 60s, 70s, 80s, because I love music. But I call myself a musical idiot.
What does that mean?
Because I love music, but I'm an idiot when it comes to playing. I cannot play. I don't even see how anyone starts out playing a guitar. I tried it for a while. Yeah, my son played. He played.
How long has he been playing?
He don't play anymore. It was just kind of one of those flash in the pan type things. He got into it for a little while. He had he got his degree in music and voice.
No kidding.
Yeah, he sings like the classical music, like traditional kind of operettas and things like that. He would love to be on Broadway. That would be probably his thing.
That's interesting.
He was.
The music industry is interesting. Living in Nashville, so many people that goes there. I think one of the hardest challenges, and I think art industry or music industry, it's a people industry. Who knows you? Who you know? It's a hang industry. If you're not a good person, you're gonna get less work, I think. I mean, people like to hire people they like. That's what I learned about the music industry. You got to show up, and it's also an investment, which is odd because I think time and your value, like the word value, is such an interesting word. I mean, like, how can I show this value, all this work that I've done as a musician, that I can get a wage that actually can sustain my life. And the problem is, I think in Nashville, so many new people go there that are willing to do it for free or less or just pennies, that makes the whole thing go even lower. So, and I try to talk nowadays about, like, I went to Berkeley and I was thankful for it, but one thing I wish they taught was more how to have a business mindset and to understand. And it's a business. It's not a
Hobby.
It's not a hobby. It's a business. You have a skill that you have to monetize. You have to make money, because at the end of the day, you're still providing for somebody, yourself, your family, or whatever. And yeah, I don't know where I'm going with it. There's a lot that you can do as a musician, as a writer, for sync licensing, film, TV, which I love because, I was always inspired by scenes, film. I'm a visual guy.
I am too.
And, that's something I definitely want to get back into, because playing, I've got gigs that if I break it down, it's like, I don't know, $5, $10 an hour. And I always have these certain questions of myself, like, how much time does it take to do this? What's the preparation like? To kind of assess if this is worth my time. Does this make sense?
Yes, because I can give you kind of an analogy for me. I taught karate for over 42 years. I have charged very low prices, and I have charged higher prices. You will get more students at higher prices, because I think what it relates to is, if you're giving it away, they don't think it's worth anything. But if you're paying for it, they think they are.
It's this whole psychology.
It is.
Yeah.
But I didn't, I love the art. I love karate, and I loved helping people. So, whether I made it or not, fine, whatever, money, whatever.
Yeah.
Because that was my secondary thing.
Yeah, these things are super interesting. I've tried so many different ways of getting clients, but I always love the really building real relationships. Like if you meet somebody and you get along really well and you show value and they appreciate it monetarily, of course, also, but also like, oh, I know you put so much work in this and you're so good. I appreciate that personability aspect of it than just writing cold emails. And I hate the word sales or selling. I like to use more education. This is what my thing can do for you, or this is what my knowledge can do for you. And it's always about value and benefits. And what's interesting is it's easier to sell visual based products than music, because music is so intangible. It's nowhere to be touched. You don't see what you're paying for, unless you go to a studio and you see all this tens of $1,000s of gear and you're like, whoa, that's cool, that's old, whatever. But when I'm producing videos, it's almost like people can see not only the equipment and that I've invested in the equipment, but also see the product that comes out of it, which is an investment that I made in myself as a creator and also as a business owner. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into owning your business, being an entrepreneur, being an artist, being a creator. It's a whole shabam. Now I'd love to, and we'll talk about this when we're having coffee, because I've got concise questions and we're kind of having a hang.
Yeah, that's fine.
And
I
love what how conversational. I don't even know what I said makes sense. Yeah, I love the conversational aspect of things. When did you start writing your book, and what was the inspiration? You're like, I want to write a book. I think I'm ready.
Well, again, it has to do with my mother. I was surrounded by books all the time.
Mm-hmm.
She would she could read a book in 2 days. She'd go through a book every 2 days. And she belonged to several book clubs. My dad was constantly having to build shelves to add books to it. And she loved it, and she impressed that upon me, that, you know, books were important, reading, and she'd always say, if you can read, you can do anything. And she is the reason that I always wanted to write. Of course, I'm starting late in life, you know, writing. This is really my first fiction. And then she got cancer. She came down with cancer. But she still read. That was her thing. She wouldn't watch. If there was a series on TV and there was a book series that it was based on, she would watch it. She would read the book. So she got down so bad that she would have the librarian pick out books for her.
Wow.
And I would go get them, bring them back, and she read till the day she passed away. And if I could get somebody else to have that feeling for books and reading, you know, your job's done. And like I said, I'm no expert. I'm novice. But that would have to be my driving factor or my original inspiration.
Well, you do get an expert as you're doing it.
Yeah,
you're doing it.
Yeah, I'm doing it. And that's something that was kind of hard for me to realize I was doing it. You know, wow, I can write, you know. But that inspiration was there. And I'm like you. I'm kind of a visual person. I love movies. I love series. I love anything like that. But it has to catch my interest.
All right.
I just don't sit down and watch anything. But as a kid, growing up in the 70s, you went to the movie every weekend. You saw movies that now are considered classics. Then you see movies that are kind of cheesy now if you look at them now and looked at them back then. But yeah, my mom she was a librarian, like I said. I mean, I can remember I had a 68 Mustang, and me and her would ride, we would ride together to school, which is only about 10 miles out that way. And she loved music, just like I did. We would listen to Elton John. I can remember playing Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, Elton John. She loved it. Rolling Stones, she loved it. Beatles, she loved it. So we had a very close connection there. And so I got it on both ends. You know, I was in high school out here. I started in the first grade out here. And she was a librarian.
What sort of books?
Huh?
What kind of books?
Hers?
Yeah.
Romance.
Romance. Like light romance or raunchy romance?
Oh, no, not raunchy.
Okay.
She didn't do raunchy. She didn't do raunchy. I had her, remember when True Blood came out?
Okay.
She would not watch it.
Oh.
But she read every book. Yeah.
Of True Blood?
Yeah, of True Blood.
Interesting.
That's based on, I think there's like 16 or 15. And,
are you inspired by romance?
No.
Not really?
I'm more of a adventure kind of guy.
Adventure.
But there is romance in the book, in the trilogy.
Huh.
And
when did you start writing your book, your trilogy?
To be honest, it's been in my head, been here ever since I was in my mid-20s.
Huh.
And it come from traveling, came from my dad being a biker in the 40s. You know, it was there. And then through the years, later on, like in the 30s or in my 40s, more or less, I started trying to sit down and write and try to write it out. But I would stop for some reason. I just didn't think. But it wasn't time to read. It wasn't time to write it yet, I guess. Because then I kept adding adventure that added to the story.
Wow.
Oh, and going back to my mom, another thing that I always, as far as, inspiration for writing, she was sick ever since she was a child. She had health issues. So I can remember her when I was in my 20s, sitting down with a yellow legal pad and start writing. And I said, what's it going to be about? She said, it's going to be about my life. And my life on the farm with your father. It's going to be a fiction, but it's going to be based on all of that. And I don't know how many times she sat down. I'd say 3 or 4 times. And she'd write in that legal pad, longhand with a pen. And I wished I could find those pads somewhere, those legal pads somewhere. I really do. Because she never did finish it, never did. But I always thought that was, she had that want, that desire to do that. And I kind of doing it for her in a lot of ways, I suppose. Doing something that she wanted to do. She took an English course when she was in her 50s probably.
Wow.
And she was asked to write a research paper, and back then you didn't use the computer. You went to the card catalog, you had to cite all your references and all of that. And she wrote a paper on Secretariat, A+. It was awesome. I still have that somewhere that she wrote. That was back when Secretariat was at the top. And I thought that was interesting.
Wow, that's awesome.
And then, of course, you talk about inspiration. That was my major inspiration. But then traveling just added to it. Of course, I traveled.
Any specific areas of where you traveled to?
I am a West person.
West?
I love the West. When I get out, or when I get into West Texas, I feel there's just something about it. There's a different vibration, a different vibe, whatever, in that area. Going across those desert highways, then New Mexico, then Arizona, California. There's just something about it. But then again, that probably goes back to when I traveled with my parents out west.
Interesting.
That was the main track that he made. The main route.
Does it bring you back those memories?
All the time. I wrote a little memoir of sorts during COVID about my dad and mom's life, how they got together, and then how it reflected on me and what they did for me, and then about me going through school and being kind of an outcast, I felt like. And I really wasn't. It was just kind of something in here. I always felt there was something missing. And maybe it was because I was adopted. I don't know. Could have been. I've never figured that one out.
Were you told that you were adopted, or you figured it out?
From day one.
What did you think?
I loved it because I knew it wasn't a mistake. They wanted me. My mom and dad tried for so long to have kids, but mom had RH factor problems. So they even kept the girl that had gotten pregnant. Back then, out of wedlock was some big thing, and they kept her at their house, paid for all of her food, clothed her, and about a week before she gave birth, she left.
Oh, wow.
And they just decided to give up, live for themselves. And about a week later, they got a call. They said, "You want a boy?" Yeah. Well, I wasn't born yet. The next day I was born. And believe it or not, back then, I was adopted the next day.
Oh, wow.
Of course, social workers had to come. I've been told, And so I'm sure that lends itself to my inspiration too. And
wow, interesting. Wow, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh,
that's awesome stories.
It's really miss my mom. And my dad does too.
What was the name of your mama?
Anna Loyce, Loyce.
What's the name of your daddy?
Willie Hulon, Hulon. My daddy always wondered, where did you get that name from, Mama? Then she said, well, I wanted to name you something else, and whatever it was that he was glad that she named him Hulon, because it was way worse.
What do you hope this book brings to your? Is it gonna be also a listenable version?
I don't know yet.
You don't know
I
yet?
haven't gone that far. I'm just getting ready to put it on Kindle.
Kindle?
Yeah, Kindle, and I'm gonna have a print version too, probably. But I've thought about that because I like to listen to books.
Yeah.
I prefer it in a lot of ways, because I'm doing a lot and I can listen while I'm.
What do you hope that gives to the listeners, readers?
I want it to be. It is a good story, and I want it to be a good story for them to read and enjoy. But it talks about all of my characters in the book are based on someone I know. Nearly every one of them. Their mannerisms, the way they walk. I visualize it while I'm writing that part or that dialogue. And I would like to realize that, people are flawed. I want them to see that things are, what people put out is totally different from what the truth is. And I kind of want that to be out, I want them to get that from the book.
Yeah, I mean, we're not robots.
I did this book for me.
Mm.
I did it for me because I always wanted to. And I've always had this story in my head.
That's interesting. I was thinking about this, something that another artist I was talking to about, that's doing art for you, for yourself, and doing art for others, and how the end result could be different. I do think you gotta love what you're doing. You gotta love what you're putting out. If you do it for other people because you're doing it based on an assumption that's what other people will like, then I think that's kind of wrong to art itself. You've got to be first and foremost the most interested and excited about your work first. If you're not, then who else is gonna be?
Exactly.
That's
if you don't believe in yourself, who's going to believe it?
You got to be first your number one fan. I know people will take this as, oh, you're egotistical or not selfish, but I don't know. But I think you got to like it. And,
you got to like yourself.
And it's got to be, as we talked about earlier, like a therapeutical experience for yourself and a way to kind of, what's the word? What I'm thinking, I forgot the word I was gonna say, but it's like a therapeutical session for yourself, that helps you first, then it can help other people. Something like that. It makes sense?
Kind of like psychoanalysis.
I guess. Yeah, I'm psychoanalyst. I can't remember what I was originally thinking in my head.
I can't get the word either.
But whatever. Well, I am just trying to imagine what that katana thing would look like.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Could you bring it and show me some?
Sure. I'm not really,
What are you wearing when you katana it?
I just wear sweats and.
Let me bring the drone. I'm gonna record some drone shots of you doing some katanas.
All right.
Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay. All right, folks. Well, that was part 1 of the 2-parter episode with TJ McKenzie. Now, I want to invite you to check out Hellfire Saints When Loyalty Fails, his latest book. It's available now, so go get your copy. Again, I want to thank TJ McKenzie for having me at his property, showing me around, and telling me some stories. And guys, if you like what you heard and what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And check out part 2 with TJ McKenzie. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.